Okay, so back to the lesson. So we have here question one, which is VAT. Like I said, we are given the following information relating to Shah Soda. Shah Soda is a local company that sells personalized bottled cold drinks to companies and schools. A unit consists of one bottle of cold drink and the personalized label. They use the periodic inventory system for all stock. They are VAT registered on the invoice-based method. Then we give it, that's just the background for question one, and then they give us information on 1A, which is the VAT question. The following transactions were taken from the accounting records of Shah Soda for the year ended 28th February 2023. On the 1st of February 2023, the SARS VAT account had a credit balance of 7,500. So that means we owe SARS 7,500. So that has been shown here in the workbook that the balance in the 1st of February is 7,500 and it is a credit balance. Now, what do they want us to do in this table? They want us to look at transactions 1 to 4 and then calculate what the VAT amount will be and how that VAT amount will affect the amount we owe to SARS. Will it increase the amount we owe or will it decrease the amount we owe? Does that make sense? You guys can even use the emojis. I think there is an option to use the thumbs up emoji or something. Okay, so let's look at the first transaction. Total purchases of ice were 13,000, and then in brackets they say the price was exclusive. So if it's exclusive, that means now in your calculation for VAT, you'll be using the fraction 15 divided by 100. So it's 15 over 100 if it's VAT exclusive, because it does not include VAT. So let's do that. 13,000 multiplied by 15 over 100. So what does that get us? Hope you guys have your calculators with. So we have 13,000 times 15 divided by 100. What do we get? What's all that amount? Okay, so you should have gotten 1,950. Yeah. Now, how will that affect the amount that we owe to SARS? So can anyone just type in the, between the two of you, type in the chat, when we purchase something, what type of VAT is that? Is it input or output VAT? Uh, So it's input VAT because what happened? The owner of the business, you went and purchased things and you were charged VAT on those items that you purchased. So now SARS owes you that money. So that means to the price, to the balance that we owe SARS, this 1,950 will decrease the amount we owe to SARS because this is input VAT. Is that making sense? So I need you guys to be vocal before I move on to something that, okay, you understand, okay, you don't understand. So whether you type or you unmute yourself, I need to know it's okay to move on. Christopher, are you okay? Do you understand? Okay, so it will decrease the amount owed. Okay, now let's carry on. Let's look at the next transaction. A creditor who was owed 6,440 granted a 7.5 settlement discount when the account was paid. So a creditor was owed 6,440. They gave us, the business, a discount of 7.5. Now, a creditor, this is someone you have purchased from on credit. So then when you had purchased, what's this? When you purchased from them on credit, input VAT, that's what happened. You were able to claim input VAT. You would be claiming input VAT. Now they're saying they gave us a settlement discount. So then we need to calculate what is the VAT amount of that settlement discount. So that means we first need to calculate what the discount is. So the full amount we owe them was 6,440 and the discount is 7.5%. So we take the 6,440. So we take the 6,440 and we multiply that by 7.5%. And that will give us 483. Okay. Now, once we have the 483, that's the discount, but that's not the VAT amount. We still need to calculate the VAT amount. So we take the 483. Now, remember, this was the full amount that we owed, meaning that is the amount including VAT. So the fraction that you're going to use now will be times 15 divided by 115. Does that make sense? That the creditor, when you go and buy at a store, whether you're buying on credit or you're buying with cash, the full amount that you are paying for or the full amount that you owe, it is inclusive of that. So that's why for this, we'll be using times 15 divided by 115 fraction. Yeah, so you take the 483, multiply that by 15 divided by 115, and that should give you 63. Now, what happened here? When you bought this, you were able to claim input VAT for the full amount, the full 6,440. You were able to calculate the VAT amount using that full price. You were able to claim a VAT amount using that full price, but now it turns out you didn't actually pay for that full price. So that means this 63, that's the discount that you didn't pay for. You can't claim that amount. So you need to reverse that claim that you did. So that means the amount that you now owe to SARS will increase because you're reversing the input VAT. Does that make sense? So this will be an increase. Questions? Okay. Then I'll carry on. An amount of 2,760 was recorded as an allowance made to a debtor, and the VAT of 360 was recorded as such. On investigation, it was discovered that this was, in fact, a trade discount that was granted and should have not been recorded. Now, in the previous question, we were dealing with a settlement discount, meaning when you go and pay off a debt and then they give you a discount. Now, a trade discount is when you go to the store and they're telling you, oh, this is 50% off or this is 25% off. That means when you get to, you're not going to be paying the full amount. You're paying less the full amount. So that means that discount should have not been part of the calculation. I don't know if that's making sense. It should only have been part of the full amount should have not been recorded, the 360. Questions? So this 2,760 that was recorded in allowance was a trade discount, meaning you went to the store and you bought something, but then you didn't pay that 2,760. So it was not an allowance. It was just a discount that I gave you at the till. So it's not like a settlement discount. When you're given a trade discount, you just record the goods or whatever item that you purchased at the amount less the discount. You don't now record that you were given a trade discount. I hope that makes sense. So you don't record the trade discount in your books. The only thing you record is a settlement discount. So if you get a trade discount, you just record whatever item you bought at the amount less the discount. So this 2,760 should have not been an allowance, meaning the VAT then of 360 should have not been recorded in your books. Now, back to what's this? It was recorded as an allowance made to a debtor. The VAT of 360 was recorded as such. So they recorded this as if okay. So an allowance, what is an allowance? An allowance to a debtor usually when they make returns or when we owe them money. So that's what happened here. That's how this was an error, but that's how this was recorded. So now when that allowance was recorded, the VAT that was recorded would have been input VAT or a reverse of output VAT because when a debtor comes to buy from you on credit, that's a sales transaction. So we record output VAT. But then when you give them an allowance on a return or something, then we call that, what's this? A reverse of output VAT. So this is what happened here. In error, they recorded a reverse. So now we need to then increase the amount owed again. I don't know if that's making sense. So if anyone has a question, you can ask now. Or did that make sense? So was that transaction clear? I can move on. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. Number 4, a debtor who owed 3,680 was written off as irrecoverable. So this is when we write someone off as a bad debt. We include them in our bad debts because they're not going to pay us. We're writing them off. So we need to calculate then what the amount will be on that. So that was the full amount. So we're using the fraction 15 over 115. So that'll be 3,680 times 15 over 115. And that will give us 480. Now, what are we going to do with this? When the debtor again, you need to think of it in terms of what happened before and what is happening now. So how did they become our debtor? Because we sold to them on credit. So when a sale happens, what type of VAT is that? Output VAT, which would have inc increased the amount owed to SARS. Now we're saying we're never going to get that money. So how are we going to pay SARS for money that we are not going to get? So then we need to decrease the amount that we owe to SARS. Did that make sense? Any questions? Yeah. Okay, so yes, does it go in our books as input VAT? So yes, you would record it as input VAT because, or a reverse of output VAT, but you would treat it as input VAT. So if you guys haven't done it as a reverse of output, then yes, put it as input VAT. Did that make sense? Okay, so that's question 1 with VAT. We can move on now to inventories. So inventories. Okay, so this is the information has been given. Let's look at the required. For the first question, yeah, so let's look at the required. So for the first question, they're telling us to calculate the weighted average of 1 unit of cold drink for the year ended 28th February 2023. Okay, so let's look at the information that's been given for inventory. For number one, they're telling us Shah Soda values their stock of bottles using the weighted average method. They say, that all flavors cost the same and the turnover is faster than the shelf life. Shah Soda has a delivery contract which costs 30,500 per annum to deliver all their purchases to their labeling factory. Customers collect or are charged for delivery. The stock records for the financial year ending 28th February 2023 are as follows, and then the following information was extracted from the stock records. Okay, so we'll come back to this because they want us to calculate uh, 1 unit of cold drink for the year ended. Okay, so this is about the stock of the bottles, the information that they've given us in number one. So now they want us to calculate what will be the weighted average cost of 1 unit at the year end. So now we need to look at what is the information they've given us here. So if you're using the weighted average method, for the weighted average method, in order to get your weighted average cost for 1 unit, you need to take your opening stock. So the value of your opening stock, your value of all your stock at the top, and then at the bottom, the number of units of stock. So how do we do this? We take our opening stock plus our purchases minus returns, and then we also, yes, so minus returns. And if there's anything that was donated as well or something like that, then you would put it there as well. And then you would also need to include your cost of transport. So delivery cost, you also need to include it there. So this is what you put in at the top. So the value of your opening stock plus your purchases. And then in A, they told us they returned 35,000 bottles on the 1st of August 2022 as the lids were found to be faulty. So now these 35 bottles, they returned on the 1st of August. So we need to look from our purchases, where are they coming from? And if you can see here, from, sorry, as you can see here, before before the return on the 1st of August, we made a purchase in July. So that's where our goods will be coming from. Does that make sense? So the returns will be from our July goods. So we'll be using July's unit price. And then during the year, they sold 1,575,000 units at 9 Rand each. That's for our sales amount. And then as the number of bottles are given to the employees at the weighted average value as part of their year end of year hampers. Okay, that is information that will be relevant, I think, in the next questions. So now we're just calculating the weighted average of 1 unit of cold drink. So like I said, at the top, it's the value of those units. And at the bottom, you're putting in the number of the units. So opening first, starting off with our opening. So our openings stock total value is 1.4 million. And then at the bottom, we put the number of units, and that has been given as 350,000. Then we add purchases. So our purchases, we had purchases a total of 5,575,000. So we put that at the top, 5,575,000. And then at the bottom, the total purchases, the units, which is 1,550,000. Then we continue, we have our returns. Like I said, the returns were made in August. The purchases before that were made in July. So we need to calculate what the value of the returned bottles is. So we take 35,000 bottles and then we multiply that by the unit cost from July's purchases, which is 3. So times 3 rand, and that will give you 105,000, which is our returns from August. Okay, any questions with that calculation? How we got the value of our returns? Yeah, I'm going to continue. So now we have the value of the returns. Well, returns we minus because they reduce our value of, they reduce our stock. So we are going to say minus 105,000, and then we divide by the number of units that were returned, which is 35,000. Okay, my screen's, I can't see. Okay, let me just, yeah. Can you still not see anything? It says here that you are following along. I'm sorry about that, but I will be posting what's this. The lesson is recorded, so I will be posting it to my YouTube channel, and then I'll share the link with you guys in the group so that you have access to that. Okay, where was I? Okay, so we now have our returns. Now, if you remember at the beginning of our background information, they told us that the delivery contract, which cost 30,500 per annum. So that is part of our transport cost. We need to include that to the cost of our cold drinks. And it's 30,500 per year. So we just add the 30,500 and you won't have what's this for that? There's no number of units, it's just delivery cost. So now we have everything, our opening plus purchases minus returns plus our transport cost. So at the top, we have 1.4 million plus 5,575,000 minus 105,000 plus 30,500, which will give us 6,900,500. So 6,900,500. And then at the bottom, we have 350,000 plus 1,550,000 minus the 35,000 from your returns. And that will give you 1,865,000. Then we just need to then put that in a fraction. So now we need to find out, divide the value by the number of units, and that will give us our weighted average of 3 rand 70 cents. 3 rand 70, and that's your question done. So that's how you do your weighted average. Opening plus returns. Sorry, opening plus purchases minus your returns. And then if there are any other costs such as transport cost that you need to add as part of the cost, then you need to add that as well. And then at the bottom, you just have the number of units. Yeah. Is everyone okay to move on from that question? Does anyone have a question with any part of the calculation? Okay, I'm gonna assume everyone's good. Now, in the next part, they want us to calculate the number of bottles of cold drinks that were given to the employees. Now, we have the number, we have our opening, we have our purchases, we have our closing, we have our returns, and we also have the number of units that were sold. So for this calculation, what you need to do is to take your opening, which is 350,000 units, plus your purchases, minus your returns, and then minus your closing. And then, so let's do that. 350,000 350,000 plus purchases of 1,550,000 minus returns of 35,000 minus the closing stock of 275,000, and then that amount, after you've gotten that amount, you need to minus then the amount that was sold. Because if you take your opening plus purchases minus returns minus closing, it's supposed to give you the units sold. So uh, if you minus your sales from that formula, then you should be getting zero. If you're not getting zero, then that means something was stolen or something was damaged, or in this case, the bottles were given to the employees, meaning they were not sold. So we just need to minus this by the number of units sold, which is 1,575,000 minus 1,575,000, and that will give us the number of bottles that were given to the employees. So in your brackets, you have 350,000 plus 1,550,000 minus 35,000 minus 275,000. And that will give you 1,590,000. Then, wait, 35, 350, 35,000. Yes. And then you subtract 1,575,000, and that should give you 15,000. So that is how many bottles were given to the employees. Any questions about how we got the 15,000 units? Okay, is everything clear? Okay, can I move on? Okay. Now we want us to complete the trading statement for the sale of cool drinks only for the year 20th February 2023. So we're doing our sales, our cost of sales, and then gross profit they said not to calculate. So we're just doing sales and cost of sales. So our sales, we were told in the information that 1,575,000 units were sold at 9 Rand each. So your sales is just the number of units times the selling price, which is 9. So that will be 1,575,000 multiplied by 9 Rand, and that will give you your sales, your total sales, 175, 9, and that should be 14,175,000. Then we continue. Cost of sales. How are we getting our cost of sales? Cost of sales is equal to your opening stock plus your purchases. And then we add our, what's this? A delivery goods, that is part of your, what's this, carriage on purchases. That's what we call it. So you add your carriage on purchases. Carriage on purchases, and then you need to subtract your returns. And your closing stock as well, and that will give you your cost of sales. So let's start with our opening stock. Our opening stock has been given as 1.4 million, so we just write down 1,400,000. Then we get to our purchases. For our purchases, we have, what's this? We purchased goods worth 5,575,000. But then remember, of those goods that we purchased, some of them were given to employees, meaning they were not sold, meaning then that amount cannot be part of our cost of sales. We need to minus that amount from our purchases and make it net purchases because our cost of sales is just the cost of the goods that we have sold. So we can't have it as part of our cost of sales if it was given to the employees. So yes, you have the 5,575,000 that was purchased, but then of that 15,000 was given to the employees. Now, if you remember, 15,000 units, we are going to use the weighted average for the cost of those units because we don't know which month they were coming from. So we just need to minus 15,000 times 3 Rand 70. Okay, did that make sense? On how to calculate our net purchases and why we need to subtract the 15,000 units. Okay, so you have the 5,575,000 and then we minus 15,000 times 370 and that will give us 5,519,500. So 5,519,500. Those are our purchases. Then our carriage and purchases, that's the delivery cost of 30,500. So we just add that. Then returns, we calculated our returns as the 105,000, which is 35,000 times 3. That was in the first question. And we are minusing those. So you need to show that by either by putting brackets or a minus in front of your amount. Then closing stock, same thing with closing stock. We're using the weighted average method, meaning we're going to take the units, which is 275,000, and multiply that by the weighted average per unit, which is 3 Rand 70. So that'll be 275,000 times 3 Rand 70 to give us a total of 1,001. I know 1,017,500. Okay. So now you can calculate your cost of sales, which is opening plus purchases plus carriage minus our returns minus our closing. So that will be 1.4 million plus 5,519,500. Excuse me, plus 30,500 minus 105,000 minus 1,017,500. And that should give you 5,827,500 that you will be minusing from your sales. Okay. Any questions on the trading statement? Anything you guys want me to repeat? You can always go back. Don't be scared. Okay. Let's continue then. Okay, so let's continue with our inventory question. So on page 4, the orders in 1.5 to calculate the cost of sales of the blocks of ice for the year ended 28 February 2023. Now let's read the information on the blocks of ice. Okay, so we are told that Shah Soda also sells ice blocks of 30 Rand each. As the ice melts, they've decided to value the stock using the first in, first out method. They stopped selling these when their freezer was damaged by load shedding. The following was taken from their stock records for the financial year ended 28 February 2023. So first in, first out, that means what was bought first needs to be sold first. So if the older goods get sold first, meaning if you have a closing stock, it is coming from your newer goods. Okay, so let's continue. We're given this information. They have the opening stock, the purchases, and the closing stock, which is 0. Then for A, they're telling us that there's no carriage on orders over 200 blocks. And then 250 blocks that were purchased in May 2022 were given free of charge to customers who placed bulk orders. So we made donations of 250 blocks, like we gave them away. And then for C, they're saying 100 blocks of ice purchased in May 2022, melted in June 2022. The rest was sold. Okay, so that information is relevant as well. Then let's see if there's anything else in the next page to know about the ice. Okay, that's just it. So they wanted us to calculate our cost of sales. Now remember, like we said before, cost of sales, that's calculating the cost of the goods that you have sold. So with the units first, just looking at the units, they've given us the opening stock. According to the formula for cost of sales, we would take the opening stock, which is 300, and then we add our purchases, which are 1,200. Then going over now to the other information they've given us. They said 250 blocks that were purchased in May were given free of charge. So we need to minus that because we didn't sell those goods. Those goods were given away. And then the last part, they're saying that 100 blocks of ice purchased in May melted in June 2022. The rest were sold, meaning from May's purchases of 800, 100 of those melted. So we need to also minus those because what? They were not sold. Remember, cost of sales is for the cost of the goods that you have sold. So if you didn't sell that, it can't be part of the calculation for cost of sales. You need to subtract it. So then we need to now find out how many units were then actually sold. So let's just write this down. Okay, so regarding the opening stock, they didn't say anything about the opening stock being, what's this? With the opening stock, they didn't say anything about it being damaged or anything. So we can assume that all goods were sold for opening. So the full 2,700. So we take the 2,700 and add it. Plus 2,700. And then from our purchases from March, we were told that for March we purchased 400 at 8 Rand, so that's 3,200. And they didn't say anything in the adjustments about those purchases. So we add the full amount as part of our calculation. So plus 3,200. Now in May, 250 ice blocks were given for free, and then 100 were melted. So now for May, we need to calculate how many of, as they told us the rest was sold. So that means we purchased how many? 800, right? 800 units. Then of those, 250 were given for free, given out for free, and then 100 melted. So that means 800 minus 250 minus 100. That will give us the amount that was sold. So that will be 800 minus 250 minus 100, which will give us an amount of 450. So of May, only 450 was sold. So we just take the 450 times 7. So 450 times 7, and that will give us the cost of the goods that were sold from May's purchases, which is 3,150. So we can add that 3,150. Then they said there was no carriage of purchases over 200 blocks. We purchased 400 and 800, so we didn't have carriage. And closing stock is 0, so we don't have to minus any closing stock. So now we have for our calculation for cost of sales, 2,700, which is our opening, plus 3,200, which are our purchases from March, plus 3,150, which are our purchases from May minus the other stuff, meaning the ones that melted and the ones that were given away for free. And that would give us our cost of sales of 2,700 plus 3,200 plus 3,150 of 9,050. Okay, any questions there? Okay, all good. Then the last question says the owner received a quote of 4,800 to repair the freezer. Explain why it would be profitable for the business to repair the freezer when the value of the ice that melted was less than 1,000. Use figures to support your answer. Okay, so they received a quote of 4,800 to what's this to repair the freezer. Now let's go back here. They said Shah Solder also sells the ice blocks at 30 Rand each. So that's the selling price they're selling it at. So what you need to determine with this type of question is that if you don't repair the freezer, that means you won't be selling ice anymore, right? So then we need to then determine, is it profitable to make to what's this to repair the freezer? We will still be profitable if we add the repairs to our expenses. We will be still making profit. So what you need there is your sales revenue minus all your cost, including the repairs, and then determine whether that is still profitable. Don't know if that made sense, but let me repeat it again. In this question, they want you to determine should they repair the freezer. So how will they do that? They need to know whether they will make a profit if they repair the freezer or they won't make a profit. So then what we need there is to calculate our revenue. Profit, right, is your income minus your expenses. So we need to calculate what our sales were or revenue was minus all your costs. That means including your revenue. We already calculated the cost of sales. So our other cost is just the repairs. So let's calculate our sales first. Sales is 30 Rand per block. So we say 30 times how many units did we sell? Did we sell? Did we sell? Sorry, 300 from the opening, 400 from March, and then 450 from May. So that will be 300 plus what's this? 400 plus 450. So we'll be multiply to get our sales price. That is what we'll be multiplying things our 30 Rand by. So 300 plus 400 plus 450. And that will give us our sale. Yeah. 30 times 300 plus 400 plus 450, which would give us 34,500. So that is our sales amount, 34,500. And then our cost. What are our costs? Our cost of sales, we calculated that as 3,150. And then they're also telling us to repair, what's this? No, sorry, it was 9,050. And they're also telling us that to repair our fridge, that will be at a cost of 4,800. And then remember, we have ice, the 100 blocks ice. We didn't willingly give that up. It was lost because of a fridge that was damaged. So that was a loss that we suffered there. So we need to calculate the cost of that as well. So that was 100 blocks, and the cost of the goods that we lost was 7 Rand. So 100 times 7, which is 700. So we need to include that as part of our cost as well, because that was a loss. Does that make sense? So our costs will be made up of cost of sales, the money for the repairs, and the money and the amount from the loss for the 100 blocks of ice that melted. So then that will be 9,050 plus 4,800 plus 700. And that will be our total cost. 9,050 plus 4,800 plus 700, which will give us 14,550. Okay, so now we just say 34,500 minus 14,550, which will give you a total amount of 19,950. So as you can see, we are in the positive. We are still making a profit. So your comment there, so you have calculated, you've done the calculation to see that you're making a profit, but then you also need to still say, okay, we are making a profit. That means we can continue to sell. It is worth it to continue to repair the freezer. Okay. Question? Okay. So what we'll be working on next time, this was just question one, which is just that and inventory. What we'll be working on next time will be a question on companies' financial statements. So we'll be doing a full statement of comprehensive income and three notes. And then we'll just keep on continuing with the question. But before we close it off, the people who joined today, IEB or CAPS. I did ask in the group, not everyone answered whether they're IEB or CAPS, but we will be doing both curriculums, like past papers from both curriculums. So I'm just asking so that a person knows that, okay, today this is what we're doing. Okay, you're both IEB. Okay, so that's the question we're doing today. But just for the people who are even listening to the recording, it's not that the people who answered in the group, they said they're IEB, so that's why we chose IEB for today's question. But we'll be alternating with both, but it is beneficial to attend both because sometimes there are things that you might have missed that will be will be tested in a certain exam question. So either way, both are good resources, both are good ways to test yourself for the exams. Okay, now before we close it off, are there any questions, even if they're not regarding the exam itself, maybe about the session? Maybe there's something you want to know that you're not clear on. Okay, please go over the FIFA method one last time. Okay, so with the FIFA method with this, okay, is there anything the do you want me to go overall over the FIFA method or this question, what they tested on the FIFA method? This question. Okay. So with this question, what they asked us when it comes to the FIFA method was calculating the cost of sales of the block of ice. So here, with the FIFA method, like I said, let me just go over that first. The FIFA method, like I said, you are there to make sure that when it comes to your cost of sales, you know that the oldest are sold first. Then the other part of it is that then the newest, I mean, if there's any closing stock, then it will come from your newest stock. Now, for this particular question, they wanted you to just calculate the cost of sales of the blocks of ice. So now there, we, as we know, with the closing stock being zero, that means everything was sold, or the other stuff wasn't sold, but something happened to it, as we saw in the adjustment. But that means nothing was left over. So our closing stock is zero. So that means starting from opening stock, our opening stock was sold because it's the oldest. So that's where we're going to sell it first. And then now looking at our purchases, we had two purchases, March and in May. Now in March, 400 units were 400 blocks of ice were purchased. And with that one, they didn't say anything in the adjustments about anything being a problem. They like maybe something was ice melted or something. So there you're just selling the full 3,200. So you are including the full 3,200 as part of your cost of sales. Then for May now, in part B, in information B, they told us 250 blocks that were purchased were given free of charge to customers. So you need to minus that from the 800 because it can't be part of your cost of sales. Like I've said before, the cost of sales is for the cost of goods sold. So if it was not sold, in this case, given free of charge, it can't be part of the cost of sales calculation. So you need to minus it. And then the other part is C, which is the 100 blocks of ice that were purchased in May that melted in June because of the fridge. You need to minus that as well because they melted. Yes, we don't have them anymore, but they were not sold. So you minus that to get 450, and that is the number of units that she had versus sold from May. So now cost of sales calculation is your opening plus your purchases plus your carriage and purchases minus your returns minus your closing stock. We didn't have carriage and purchases. We didn't have the returns. Also didn't have closing stock. So this will just be opening plus purchases. So you take your opening, the total value of your opening, plus your March's, what's this? March's purchases, and then plus May's, what's this amount that was sold, which is 450, that we calculated by minusing the other amount. So 450 times 7, that gave you the 3,150, which is the total value of those goods that were sold from May. And that would have given you your cost of sales of 9,050. Now 1.6, this was not FIFO. Okay, sorry, my sound may be a little muffled. Okay, but for 1.6, it was not really a question on FIFO, it was just a question on profitability. So you could have been asked that in, what's this? You could have been asked the same question whether you were using weighted average. So you would have treated it the same way still. Okay. Are everybody's questions answered? Okay. I'm glad you understand. So this is where we'll end off today because the next question is a big question and we have had an hour already. Don't want to overwhelm people. Then I will make sure to resend this, what's this, the question paper and the answer book in the group for people who maybe weren't there when I sent that. But then I'll see you guys next week when we continue with this paper. Hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Bye. Thank you so much.